Well, greetings, my friends. I'd like to welcome you to another video. Lovers of history, fellow historians, and fellow lovers of Titanic and Titanic enthusiasts. I'd like to do another video for you guys on one of the publications from the period when the Titanic sank. Now, last year, I did a publication video. I did the Boston Globe, and I'd like to do another one today. Today is the 20th of April. And 110 years ago today, this publication was published. It's the Daily Graphic. The Daily Graphic, which was published on Saturday, April 20th of 1912. And let's see, this is number, was it 69798? You can see a beautiful depiction of the Titanic on the cover. And this is Titanic, in memoriam number, and 1 penny. So this is published 110 years ago. I would like to point out that this is a copy. This is not the original, but this is taken from the original. So all the information contained in this publication is exactly as it was, unedited and unaltered in any way, from April 20th of 1912. So when you open it up, this whole section is devoted to the Titanic and the disaster. The top, the ocean grave of the Titanic. Lost liner's tragedy, the sailing and the end. Ice, the foe, the shock that rent the ship, the brave dead, women saved by men's sacrifice. And your eyes are directed to the photograph. And this is actually the commander of Titanic in the bows of his ship. The portrait of Captain Smith was taken on board the Titanic on the day the vessel's departure from Southampton. He was also in command of the Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, when on her maiden voyage she collided with the R.M.S. Hawk. So there was kind of a black cloud hanging over him right from when he took the Olympic on her maiden voyage. And we all know what happened on the Titanic. The happy start. The happy start. We paused in our cheering, then chilled to a sudden silence at the first evidence of the great ship's untested powers, for evil as for good. And our cheering now is hushed into sobbing. For within a week of her majestic passage from Southampton Harbor, the displacement of the Titanic has been so tremendous that she has drenched the bosom of the world in an ocean of tears. Those of us who have come to wish the vessel Godspeed, in the dark wisdom of Providence to wish Godspeed and a fair journey to those loved ones who were going out upon the longest and loneliest voyage in eternity, were up by the times on that pleasant Wednesday morning, long before the stroke of noon, when we knew Captain Smith would climb into his lofty perch on the navigation bridge to give the order to let go from the Trafalgar landing stage. The air was busy with chatter, with goodbye for the present and good wishes. We lived that morning in an atmosphere which was full of pride. All these happy-faced Southampton women were proud that their men had entered into service of the greatest vessel ever built by man. They prattled one of the Titanic with a short of suggestion of proprietorship. Rumors and legends and tales of her glories and luxuries and powers were also bandied about in every street of Southampton. She was a carnival of marvels, a mighty treasure, house of beauty and luxurious case. In the phrase of the people, she was the last word. The phrases of the people are often true, because they are double-edged. Another phrase sticks now in the puzzle of a darkening mind. They're breaking all the records this time. And so they were. It had been determined that the Titanic should excel in luxury and equipment. Her sister vessel, the Olympic, which had sailed for New York a week before, and in a sort of desperate endeavor to achieve this, all who had come to take the temporary parting from dear ones and friends were shown a new and latest marvel on the promenade deck of the Titanic. It was called the Café Parisien. Its walls were covered with a delicate work around which trailed cool foliage. We looked at the soft cushioned chairs, we regarded the comfort of the whole scene, and feeling the suggestive atmosphere of the place, thought of those who would be taking coffee there after dinner, with music, lulling in every sense, melting into the gentle rolling rhythm of the open sea. What a place in which to dream. Perhaps it was one young to hold a little romantic dalliance. What a place in which to forget the trials and trivias of the world. And what a place to sleep. Some of us looked into the private suites that were to cost a mere trifle of 870 pounds a voyage. And here we found some dining rooms, bedrooms that looked like in themselves little enchanted palaces of slumberous rest and private promenade decks. Let us note that everyone spoke of dining rooms and bedrooms, and the word cabin would have been in the aneurysm, the floating citadel of luxurious beauty. We examined the delicate glass and napery, the flowers of the fruit, the baths and the playing courts, and the immeasurable mechanical appliances that seemed to make personal effort or discomfort the only human impossibility on board. There was one other thing that, looking even for a brief half hour the cushioned lamp of luxury, ever thought of giving a cursory glance or a thought. No one looked at the boats. Functionally at noon, Captain E.J. Smith, a typical figure of an English sailor, as we knew him and imagined him altogether, pre-Titanic days, took up his post of captainsmanship on the navigation bridge, and as the bells sounded, the cheers of the multitudes went upwards, and hands and handkerchiefs were waved from the way of the ship's side, and kisses were blown across the last familiar greetings exchanged. So she went away with the human freight of 2,208 souls. We cheered to the last and waved our rejuvenation and our handkerchiefs, and that night I think there were not an unhappy woman in all of Southampton. And tonight it was the court, the count, the tear-stained faces, and to cast a reckoning over the trivial of these broken hearts, some here, some 2,000 miles away, but all united beyond the cleavage of the pitiless seas by the scourged companionship of sorrow. The noble element in the ocean tragedy. What we thought. What we thought. So the Titanic went her way, and we went ours, and thought perhaps little about. We gave thought of remembered joy in her strength and beauty, until the Tuesday morning came the news that smote upon our hearts with the thunderous of doom. These were, of course, the first indefinite rumblings that woke fear in every human beast. She had struck an iceberg. She had been rent, but was unsinkable. She was heading slowly for shore, a great giant wounded thing in the wake of the Virginian. How our hopes died down until it seemed that the heart was burnt into the heap of dead cold ashes, only to rise phoenix-like in jubilant and hopeful expectancy. Human lips have sobbed out strange prayers before, but what volume of prayers went up to heaven in thankfulness to the Lord of hosts that had brought the new wonder of wireless telegraphy out of the slow womb of time. We thought that the unforgettable message speeding through the wireless air is marked upon the chart sheets, SOS. We picked up the common phrase of the operator and repeated to ourselves, "Save our souls," and thanked Providence for their salvation. We pictured the scene, the lonely operator, composed with that old English variance that had turned the blood of history into wine, calmly tapping out the cry of help, We saw the realization of the message in the operator's cabin on other vessels. We saw the wonderful chain composed of those three words, stronger than stone, or iron, or tempered steel, stronger than wind or sea, suddenly dragging all the vessels within the sphere of Harding away from their allotted courses, and sending on them the great adventure of succor and mercy. We pictured them racing along the railiness roads of the open sea, rushing with incessant speed towards the spot of the catastrophe. We had leisure to imagine the scene because we were told there had been a great deliverance, because we felt that man had fought his battle with the ocean and had won. Then we knew that we had lost. What we learned. And what we learned. All the world knows how slowly these confessions of defeat came in upon us, how slowly, and the flickering of expiring hope was beating down within our breasts. With that, the hands of the veils were drawn from the implacable face of doom. Gradually the hush laid hold upon us. Gradually a realization of what had happened sank into our souls. We knew that nothing but miserable residue of the great human freightage had been saved to us. We knew that the enchanted of the floating palace, conceived by the brain of man, was wrought by his hands with all its mighty scheme and luxurious case, health and comfort, lay somewhere tangled in an old sea force, 2 miles beneath the quiet surface of the sea. Little more do we know as I write. We can only hear the sobbing of the women in the street corners of Southampton, and find in them an eternal echo of the cheers with which we sent the Titanic out on her first and her last and her only voyage. We know that among these women are many mothers. We know the thankfulness of thoughts in their faces are dark with sorrow. They are untouched with the light's shadow of shame. For though man has been beaten once again in his old fight with the seas, yet he has done one thing with all the glory and splendor of a victory. He has taken the last gift of God and used it well. He has died as we all would die for others. Picturing that last dark, awful moment, the last order of the captain, the last farewells, so different from what these exchanged in Southampton. The last tears and the last high human courage. All our sorrow is tempered by the thought that the women are alive to us and the children, and that all the men died as we would have died, and they should like to know they have died ourselves. Had God steeled over the hearts with a similar courage? Knowing this as we peer into the dark pictures of yet unrecorded scenes, so deep with human anguish, and yet so lighted with human grandeur, we may learn to endure the sobbing of the women and the cries of the fatherless that come up in every surge of the immortal sea. Knowing this, we may take comfort in the great cry of a great poet in a sea-washed island that had borne so many poets, and acclaim from him that nothing is here from tears, nothing to wail, and knock the breast, no weakness, no contempt. Despise or blame nothing, but well and fair, and what may be quiet unto us as death so noble. Moving over to the next page, you can see there are all kinds of photographs on it, beautiful pictures. Features which contributed to the splendors of the Titanic. You can see the single berth stateroom, a deck stateroom, a swimming bath, a popular feature which is possessed by very few vessels afloat. And that's absolutely gorgeous. The Turkish bath cooling room, which, with its suggestion of the mysterious East, is one of the ship's most interesting rooms. The Veranda Cafe adjoining the smoke room. It is surrounded by green trellis work over which grow climbing plants. So that must have been absolutely gorgeous. A view of the staircase from the Great Hall. From this hall, lifts go up and down to every floor of the ship. Beautiful. You can see the dome on top, or part of it. The Georgian smoke room, paneled with the finest mahogany and relieved everywhere on the mother of pearl island work. Can you imagine sitting in there having a cigar and a snifter of brandy or some cognac on the Titanic? The restaurant, dedicated in Louis, let's see, 16th style, and paneled from floor to ceiling in French walnut. So the mahogany and the walnut are very hard woods, and so is the teak. And I have recently seen a documentary where they went and excavated and they got deeper into the ship, into the Turkish bath, and some of the teak was still there. Absolutely gorgeous. All right, so that page has a lot of photographs. So we go on to the next page, and you can see the ocean grave of the Titanic is continued, and we're drawn to the photograph in the middle of the page. And this is the sender of the SOS signal for help. Mr. G.G. Phillips, from the Marconi wireless operator on board the Titanic, whose signal SOS was received by liners hundreds of miles away. And in this section, worldwide help, funds for the relief of sufferers, Mansion House Fund, and King and Queen among the subscribers. The Lord Mayor's Appeal. The Lord Mayor's Appeal. The Lord Mayor's letter is the following. To the editor of the Daily Graphic, Sir, I desire by your courtesy to intimate that I have seen today opened a fund in the Mansion House for the immediate aid and the permanent relief of the widows, orphans, and dependent relatives of those, whether they be crew or passengers, who have lost their lives on this great national calamity, and we invite the generous assistance of the benevolent public in attempting to relieve in some degree the distress which have been occasioned in many hundreds of families by the disaster, unfortunately unparalleled in the history of ocean navigation. In taking this step, I feel sure that I am promptly responding to the wishes of those that urge, that keep sympathy universally and unimpededly centered for those who have thus kindly been plunged and unkindly plunged into misery and distress, should assume some practical share for the future advantage of the bereaved families. Of the real extent of the calamity, it is too soon to expect reliable details, some that must eclipse before information can be obtained as to the number of those lost and their wives and families in their circumstances, but sufficient is known to make it evident that the very large sum will be required to adequately provide for those in distress, apart from their claims under the Workmen's Compensation Act. In raising a Mansion House Fund, I am assured of the hearty cooperation of the Mayor of Southampton, to the town and great bulk of the crew and the families belonged, and of others who are raising subscriptions, and I should especially welcome the assistance of the London and the press in making known the existence of the fund, and If possible, in collecting acknowledgement and remitting donations in response to the appeal, donations may be sent to the Mansion House or to the Bank of England, where an account, the Titanic Disaster Fund, has been opened. Your obedient servant, Thomas Bohr Crosby, Lord Mayor. The Mansion House, April 17th, 1912. The Titanic's operators. The Titanic's operators. Mr. J. G. Phillips, the chief wireless operator on the Titanic, was a young man of 25. He was the son of Mr. G. A. Phillips, a well-known tradesman who received his training as a telegraph operator in the Dalming Post Office, and 7 years ago joined the Marconi School at Liverpool. Since then, Mr. Phillips had acted as wireless operator on the Teutonic, Mauretania, Lusitania, and the Oceanic. He was transferred from the Oceanic to the Titanic for her maiden voyage. The second Marconi operator who was reportedly saved is Mr. Harold Sidney Bride of Shortlands, Bromley. He has been with the Marconi Company for 12 months and is 22 years of age and unmarried. Peril of the berg, floating ice fields that harass the navigation. What can be done? Notable tributes, messages from the King and the Kaiser, premier elegance. Doomed ship's farewell. Last messages from the Titanic before she sank. Many thanks. Goodbye. Good luck and goodbye. The Cunard liner Caronia, which put into Queenstown from New York on Wednesday, reported that on Monday at 4:39 a.m., she received from the Titanic a message stating that the White Star liner had been in a collision. It had hit an iceberg and was in sinking condition and required immediate assistance. Being about 700 miles distant from the Titanic, Captain Barr knew that the Caronia could not reach the White Star liner in time to render help. Another ship, the Tunisian of the Allen Line, on arriving at Liverpool on Wednesday from Canada, reported that Saturday at midnight she spoke the Titanic with the wireless operator, sending the message, "Good luck." To this, and he replied, came, "Many thanks, goodbye." The Tunisian, when 887 miles east of St. John's, entered the huge ice field, through which she carried and she fully packed her way for 24 hours, then stopped all night and eventually turned 60 miles north. No fewer than 200 icebergs were seen. The commander was on the bridge for a 36-hour spell. Cunard liner's escape. Cunard liner's escape. The perils of the iceberg are so clearly shown in reports made by the captain of the other ships. This time of year is the most perilous to vessels in the North Atlantic, owing up the breakup of the Arctic ice and the floating of immense bergs southward. A great ice field, the length of was estimated at 70 miles, with a breadth of about 35 miles, had been obstructing the westbound transatlantic shipping lanes off Newfoundland Grand Banks for more than a week past. The Cunard liner Carmania, which arrived in New York on Sunday, last ran through the pack on Thursday, the 11th. She was in grave danger for a time and had to stop frequently because of the fog. The passengers sighted 25 icebergs, one cluster 100 feet away. The liner had to feel her way through the ice lane for hours. A French liner, the Niagara, was less lucky and had 2 holes knocked in her bottom and several plates bent. The Canadian Pacific liner Empress of Britain, which arrived at Liverpool from Halifax on Sunday, encountered an ice field 100 miles in extent. with enormous bergs, and steered a wide course which delayed the vessel. This was on Tuesday the 9th, when the vessel was 3 days out from Halifax. The extent of the ice was regarded as phenomenal, and the bergs appeared to be joined at the ice field, which appeared as an enormous white line on the horizon. Iceberg's death toll. Feats of wireless. We move on to the next page. Liner Deluxe, Splendor, that now lies in the depths, $1.5 million, restaurant, racket court, and a Parisian cafe. And we're drawn to the photograph in the middle once again. And this shows a wireless cabin on an Atlantic liner. This is not saying it's from the Titanic. Enormous food stores. Sister to the Olympic, the Titanic was on the last word of ocean liners and the largest ship in the world. Her fittings were most luxurious of any vessel afloat, including a restaurant furnished in Louis XVI style with reception rooms, Jacobin style, and a squash racket court. The Titanic's displacement was 46,328 tons, 1,004 tons more than that of the Olympic. She cost over $1.5 million. She was built by Harland and Wolff at Belfast and launched on May 31st, 1911. Her building took over a year, and she was fitted out nearly another year. Some idea of the Titanic's enormous size may be gauged from the following figures. Total length, 882 feet 9 inches. Her breadth was 92 feet. Height from the keel to navigation bridge was 104 feet. The gross tonnage was 45,000 tons. The load draft was 341 feet. Displacement was 60,000 tons. The indicated horsepower reciprocating engines was 30,000 shaft horsepower. The turbine engine was 16,000. She had a speed of 21 knots. She carried 10 decks, of which 7 were passenger decks. The bridge deck extended over a length of 550 feet amidship, while the promenade and boat decks were also over 500 feet long. For first-class passengers, there were 30 suite rooms on the bridge deck and 39 on the shelter deck, so arranged so that they could be left in groups to form suites, including bedrooms, with baths, etc., with communicating doors. In all, the first-class accommodation comprised nearly 370 rooms, 100 of which were single-berthed rooms. The Titanic was a floating town with accommodation for a population of over 3,000 people, made up as follows. Saloon passengers, 750. Second-class passengers, 500. Steerage passengers, 1,100. And the crew of 800. This made a total of 3,150. Unparalleled luxury. Survivors' thrilling stories. Nearer, My God, to Thee, played by orchestra as Titanic settled. Unparalleled luxury. Among the features of the Titanic, mentioned the first-class promenades and the 3 top decks, which were exceptionally fine. In keeping with public rooms, there were the large, beautiful first-class staterooms. Perhaps the most striking of these being the suite rooms decorated in different styles and periods, including the following: Louis Seize, Empire Adams, Italian Renaissance, Louis Quinze, Louis Quatorze, Georgian Regent, Queen Anne, Modern Dutch, Old Dutch. The second and third class accommodation was also on a scale of unparalleled luxury for those classes. The Titanic's special features were the 2 promenade deck suites. with private promenades about 50 feet long. An absolutely novel feature in the open-air Parisian cafe which adjoined the restaurant. The rates for those two suites during the busy season were £850 each. The following is the official account of the Titanic's first-class dining room. It is an immense room decorated with style, peculiarly English, reminiscent of early Jacobean times, but instead of the somber oak of the 16th and 17th century, it is painted a soft, rich white, with the carved and richly molded ceilings. The spacious character of the apartment would satisfy the most enthusiastic critic. Furniture is oak design to harmonize with its surroundings. Some of the missing, men famous on both sides of the Atlantic, captains of industry. Some of the saved, Lady Duff Gordon, Countess of Roth's White Star Chairman. More photographs on the next page. You can see the White Star Line headquarters, where the flag is flying half-staff after the news of the disaster, breaking the news of the Titanic's loss with over 1,200 lives to London. You can see the flag at half-staff over the headquarters of the White Star Line. People being notified of the disaster. And this ship is the Virginian, the first vessel to receive Titanic's wireless message of distress. Unfortunately, she arrived too late to be of service. We got more photographs on the next page. The iceberg above and below the waterline. You can see what you see above is not nearly the volume as what's beneath the water. Hence the phrase, the tip of the iceberg. It's a beautiful shot, the upper deck of the Titanic. You can see the lifeboats, the smokestacks, the boat deck. See some of the air vents. And this looks like it's from the aft end looking forward. Looks like it could be the port side. Lord Mayor's Fund. Mansion House Fund open for the widows and children of Titanic sailors. And on the back page, you can see a beautiful picture of Titanic as she's leaving. The Titanic passengers taking their last look at home. This is as she leaves Southampton. The scene around the fateful horde or the board at Southampton. Of course, they're all just getting the news of the disaster. And that is all the pages on this section. I'm not sure if this was a pullout or if this was actually sold on its own. But this was from the Daily Graphic. And on this date, 110 years ago, The paper was published on the coverage, or the continuing coverage, of the disaster of the R.M.S. Titanic, where she struck an iceberg southeast of Halifax, and in just under 3 hours, she sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. So my friends, I hope you enjoyed this quick video on this paper, this publication, on this very historic date. And until the next video, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching.